My daughter-in-law did not merely drop my late wife's urn. She raised it above the champagne fountain, smiled at 300 guests, and said, "Let's pour out the woman who has controlled this family from the grave." Then she smashed it against the marble floor. Porcelain burst beneath her wedding dress. Gray ash spread across strangers' shoes. A brass key I had never seen spun from the wreckage and stopped beside my son Ethan's foot. He looked down at what remained of the mother who had slept beside his hospital bed for 61 nights when he was born, then whispered, "Dad, please, don't ruin my wedding over a jar." I did not shout. I picked up the key, wrapped Margaret's ashes in the blue scarf she wore on our last anniversary, and walked to the microphone with the black briefcase beside my chair. Celeste was smiling when I opened it. She stopped when she saw the loan note bearing her signature, the laboratory report bearing mine, and a photograph of a waterfront house she believed no one knew existed. "Before you celebrate your future," I said, "you should know who owns it." Two people near the doors began walking toward her. They were not wedding guests. But to understand why my son's bride destroyed the last physical remains of my wife, and why a key was hidden inside that urn, you need to know what happened 72 days earlier, when Ethan asked for a small favor. Please, before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you are listening from today. My name is Owen Calder. I was 65 that night, a retired structural engineer who had spent 4 decades restoring bridges and public buildings across Pennsylvania. I knew collapse rarely began with the crack everyone heard. It began with hidden weakness, weight placed where it did not belong, and people choosing appearance over inspection. My family collapsed the same way. Margaret and I were married 37 years before an aneurysm took her while she trimmed rosemary outside our kitchen. Our daughter Grace became the family's quiet center. Ethan became a man who could not speak his mother's name without leaving the room. When he met Celeste Vane, I mistook confidence for strength. She called herself a reputation architect and treated every meal, holiday, and grief anniversary as content waiting to be branded. Still, Ethan laughed again. For that I overlooked warnings. She removed Margaret's photographs from camera shots, called our traditions emotional clutter, and asked whether my company shares transferred before or after probate. Then, Ethan announced their wedding. Celeste wanted Halcyon Hall, a glass-roofed estate outside Philadelphia that charged more for one Saturday than Margaret and I paid for our first home. Ethan asked me for $72,000 to secure it. "It's not a gift. My partnership bonus arrives next month. I'll repay everything." He placed Margaret's recipe book between us, as though her presence could notarize his promise. I wrote the check because he was my son, and because parents often confuse rescuing a child with helping him stand. 4 days later, the venue coordinator called to ask whether we still wanted a tour. She searched twice. Halcyon Hall had no reservation under Ethan Calder, Celeste Vane, or anyone in our family. My check had cleared. At the bank, I requested the endorsement image. The money had entered an account belonging to Vane Renewal Institute, a private clinic specializing in cosmetic procedures and cognitive health assessments. The cosmetic part confused me. The cognitive part frightened me. On the deposit slip, beneath Celeste's signature, someone had written a client reference in blue ink. Owen Calder Capacity File. I stared at my name until the teller asked whether I needed a chair. My son had not only lied about a wedding deposit. Someone had begun building a medical file about my mind, and they had used my money to pay for it. Before Margaret died, our family was never glamorous, but it was structurally sound. She teased that I inspected people like bridges, searching for stress fractures and paint over rust. The irony is that she recognized Ethan's weakness before I did. It was not greed. It was his terror of being ordinary. He arrived 10 weeks early, small enough for my wedding ring to slide over his wrist. Margaret spent 61 nights beside his incubator, reading until his breathing steadied. As he grew, she celebrated every achievement so fiercely that Ethan confused being loved with being exceptional. Second place felt like rejection. A job without prestige felt like failure. "Your worth must survive an empty room," she told him. "If you need applause to know who you are, anyone who applauds loudly enough can control you." Ethan remembered the applause, but forgot the warning. After Margaret's aneurysm, Grace helped me sort clothing, cancel appointments, and answer condolences. Ethan avoided the house because every room reminded him of his mother. I mistook it for grief alone. It also left him vulnerable to anyone promising reinvention. Celeste entered his life 14 months later with invitations and a language in which pain became bad positioning. She said Ethan had lived too long inside his mother's story. Soon he stopped visiting the memorial garden, replaced family dinners with networking events, and asked me to remove Margaret's portrait whenever Celeste filmed in my home. Each request seemed small. Removals are how erasure begins. 3 months before Celeste appeared, Margaret's estate attorney, Lena Ortiz, delivered a sealed cedar box to me. Margaret had arranged it years earlier, after helping me survive a lawsuit involving a bridge subcontractor. Her note said, "Open this only if Ethan asks you to surrender control of something you built." I considered it overly cautious and stored the box in a bank vault. Its lock required a brass key, but none had been included. Lena believed Margaret kept it somewhere meaningful. We searched her jewelry case, desk, recipes, and garden shed. Nothing. Eventually, grief made the mystery feel cruel, so I stopped looking. I placed Margaret's ashes in a porcelain urn painted with rosemary branches, never knowing the key was hidden beneath its inner base. Celeste became strangely interested in that urn. During her Christmas with us, she lifted it without permission and asked whether ashes had legal value. I took it from her. She laughed and called it curiosity. Later, Grace caught her photographing the maker's mark underneath. We assumed she wanted a replica for the wedding memorial. Now I believe she was searching for something Margaret protected before any of us knew protection would be needed. When Ethan asked for $72,000, he brought Margaret's recipe book and spoke about honoring her at the ceremony. That was not sentiment, it was strategy. He knew his mother's memory was where my judgment became softer than caution. At the bank, holding the deposit slip marked Owen Calder capacity file, I understood Celeste had studied that weakness too. What I did not know was whether Ethan had merely carried her request into my kitchen or whether my son understood why a medical file was being opened in my name. I did not call Ethan from the bank. I drove to his townhouse and parked across the street, deciding whether I was a father seeking an explanation or a man protecting himself from fraud. Through the window, I saw a camera crew surrounding Celeste while Ethan repeated, "We are building a marriage without inherited privilege." Each time he stumbled, she corrected him. The son who once hated photographs now needed permission to hold his hands. When the crew left, I knocked. Ethan's jaw looked sharper, his forehead still, and pale bruises hid near both ears. Celeste appeared with a rehearsed smile. "We're filming our wedding documentary." "Documentaries describe what happened," I said. "This one seems to decide it in advance." Ethan glanced at her before answering. That movement told me who controlled the room. Margaret's recipe book lay beneath a ring light. Celeste had written captions across copied pages, releasing the past. The Calder family reborn. My wife's handwriting had become a prop in a campaign designed to erase her. Celeste showed me the ceremony plan. A filmed ritual called The Release would require Ethan to thank his mother and promise to stop living in grief. Margaret would never ask him to stop loving her. Celeste tilted her head. Love and fixation are different. Older relatives sometimes struggle to recognize that. Ethan touched my shoulder. "Dad, she's helping us move forward. Is that why my name is attached to a capacity file?" His hand fell. Celeste said the clinic offered family wellness screenings because wedding stress could reveal hidden problems. "You have repeated yourself lately. You also forgot the tasting appointment." No invitation had reached me. She displayed one marked declined from an email address resembling mine, but containing an extra letter. The error manufactured forgetfulness while appearing accidental. "Grace has noticed things too," Celeste added. "She says you become defensive." Grace had said nothing. Celeste was distributing lies among people who trusted one another, making each believe the others were concerned. I asked Ethan whether he authorized the file. "It was a precaution. After Mom died, you changed." "Grief is not incapacity." "Nobody said it was," Celeste replied. "But refusing an assessment may look like fear of the result." Agreement gave her access. Refusal became evidence. I changed direction. Halcyon Hall had no deposit. Celeste claimed it canceled, and they moved to Aurelia House, a club offering exposure. Why wasn't I told? Changes overwhelm you, she said. Ethan nodded before realizing what he confirmed. I requested the refund and new contract. Celeste promised both by morning, then said the money had been reinvested in the wedding experience. Behind her sat a post-operative bag bearing the Vein Renewal Institute logo. Ethan stepped in front of it, too late. The clinic had not merely opened a file about my mind. It had done something costly to their faces using money meant for the wedding. I apologized and left before anger revealed how much I understood. In my truck, I called Lena Ortiz. Preserve the check, false email, and everything linked to that clinic. Tomorrow, I'm asking my son what $72,000 bought and whether he remembers who paid for it. The contracts never arrived. Instead, Ethan asked me to meet them at Vein Renewal Institute. Celeste wants transparency, he said, using a word people choose after hiding something. Lena advised me to reveal no strategy and sign nothing. At the clinic, a coordinator led us into a suite where photographs of Ethan and Celeste appeared on a screen. Red lines marked Ethan's jaw, Celeste's nose, their eyelids, and the contours beneath their chins. The total read $58,600. Another $8,400 purchased a public relations package from Celeste's former employer. The remaining $5,000 became a deposit at Aurelia House. Every dollar of my venue payment was gone. Ethan called the procedures career investments. Victor Dane is considering me for regional director. Clients judge confidence before competence. Did your employer request a new face? He looked away. Celeste answered. Visibility creates opportunity. This wedding will launch both our careers. With money obtained through a lie. Her expression hardened, then softened. The venue changed. Ethan panicked because grief makes sudden changes difficult for you. She transformed theft into accommodation for my imaginary weakness. I asked who authorized the capacity file. The coordinator reached for a tablet, but Celeste interrupted. It only organizes our observations. You repeated questions and forgot appointments. Which clinician examined me? Nobody yet. Ethan slid forward a form authorizing a cognitive consultation and allowing the clinic to discuss scheduling with him. If this concerns scheduling, you do not need my results. Celeste smiled. Refusal is your right, though resistance can be clinically relevant. I returned the form unsigned. Then I asked Ethan, when you requested the check, did you know it would fund these procedures? He touched the tender skin beneath his jaw. I knew some of it might. How much? Celeste handled the numbers. That was not my question, silence answered. My son had placed Margaret's recipe book between us, while knowing his promise was false. Celeste lowered her voice. You gave Ethan money because you wanted him happy. He is happy. You are obsessing over accounting because his life feels like losing Margaret again. It was cruelty polished to resemble insight. For one moment, I wanted to defend my grief. Instead, I remembered the false email and the words, capacity file. I let my shoulders fall. Maybe you're right, Ethan relaxed. Celeste's smaller reaction revealed more. She believed she had returned me to the role she created. Generous, grieving, and easy to redirect. I apologized and asked for clinic invoices for my taxes. Celeste agreed because refusing might renew suspicion. The coordinator printed them, including a page Celeste missed. Under future services, it listed 2 home cognitive observations, a family capacity conference, and a physician declaration package scheduled after the wedding. Outside, Ethan hugged me. I knew you'd understand. I felt the hard angle of the jaw my trust purchased. I understand more than you think. That afternoon, Lena verified that the declaration package was used in guardianship and power of attorney disputes. We had proof of preparation, but not intent. Confronting them would drive the plan underground. I needed them confident. 2 days later, Celeste arrived, carrying a silver tin tied with Margaret's blue ribbon. A peace offering. Inside were rosemary lemon cookies from Margaret's recipe. I thanked her and watched her study my face as I raised one toward my mouth. I did not bite, but I smiled as if I had, and Celeste smiled back like a woman watching the first piece of her plan fall into place. I sealed 3 cookies in evidence bags before calling Grace. She arrived after her hospital shift, saw Margaret's blue ribbon, and went silent. Mom tied every gift this way. Celeste knows. She had borrowed a dead woman's tenderness to lower my guard. Grace sent 1 cookie through a documented private testing process, approved by Lena. Until the result returned, I behaved as if I had eaten them. I canceled lunch with Ethan, saying I felt unusually tired. Within 20 minutes, Celeste texted, "Confusion can happen when grief and stress accumulate. Please record any dizziness." She was collecting language, not protecting my health. The laboratory called the next evening. Each cookie contained doxylamine, a common sleep aid ingredient, at 4 times the normal dose. Repeated exposure could cause blurred thinking, memory problems, and falls exactly the symptoms in Celeste's capacity file. "She could have killed you with your blood pressure medicine," Grace said. Lena remained precise. "We can prove an attempt to impair him. We follow evidence, not anger." The cookies, ribbon, tin, messages, and testing records were preserved. Lena then proposed a controlled risk. Let Celeste believe the first batch worked and document what she did next. I agreed if Grace controlled everything entering my home, an independent geriatric physician doctor. Samuel Reed examined me first. His tests showed no cognitive impairment and established a clean baseline before Celeste could manufacture decline. 2 days later, I called Ethan and deliberately repeated our meeting time. Celeste took his phone. "That is the 3rd time you've asked," she lied. "I'm bringing more of Margaret's cookies. They seem to calm you." Grace installed a lawful camera covering my kitchen. Ethan stayed in the car when Celeste arrived. She placed a fresh tin on my counter. "Did you eat the others?" "Every one." Relief crossed her face. She pushed the tin closer. "These are stronger. Margaret used extra herbs when the family needed sleep. Margaret never drugged food." I asked whether I should tell my doctor about dizziness. "Doctors overreact. Let our clinic observe you first. Ethan and I can explain what we've noticed." She listed appointments that never existed, repeated stories I had told once, and a day I supposedly left the stove burning. Celeste had not been in my house that day. I made my hand tremble as I lifted a cookie. "Maybe Ethan should manage my accounts." She leaned forward. "Only until the wedding stress passes. Would I sign something? We already prepared it. You only need to trust your son." There it was, manufactured symptoms, isolation from my physician, and a document waiting for a drugged signature. I set down the cookie. "Not today. I'm tired." Celeste gathered her purse and told me to eat 2 before bed. The camera captured everything. The new batch contained the same drug at a higher concentration. Ethan called that night. "Celeste says you agreed I should help with the accounts." I said I might consider it. His silence lasted too long. "Dad, please don't make this difficult." He did not know about the laboratory result, but he knew documents existed and wanted my resistance removed. At Lena's office, Dr. Reed's evaluation lay beside the toxicology report. "They expected to create a confused man," she said. Instead, they created a competent witness. Her investigator then entered with a probate filing submitted that morning. Celeste and Ethan were no longer preparing to seek control. They had already begun. The probate filing was 27 pages written in the language of concern. Ethan requested temporary authority over my finances because I allegedly suffered accelerating cognitive instability following prolonged bereavement. Celeste was named successor agent and family care coordinator, a warm title with no legal meaning. Attached were the false invitation, Ethan's account of repeated conversations, and clinic notes treating observations as facts. Even my decision not to eat with them became social withdrawal. Boundaries had been translated into symptoms. On page 19, Lena found the real danger. If approved, Ethan could control my accounts, vote my remaining company shares, collect income from 8 rentals, change insurance beneficiaries, and place me in supervised housing. The order lasted 30 days, enough time to borrow, transfer assets, and create obligations requiring years to unwind. Why wasn't I notified? The application claimed notice might cause agitation or asset dissipation. They asked the court to protect me from learning they were protecting me. The hearing was scheduled for the Monday after the wedding. Their timing was deliberate. Wedding photographs would present Ethan and Celeste as a stable family, while my refusal to celebrate could become another episode. The clinic assigned Dr. Warren Pike to observe me that weekend. Lena knew him from contested guardianship cases, always testifying for the relative who paid. Challenging everything immediately would warn Celeste that we had discovered the cookies and false records. Instead, Lena filed a confidential response supported by Dr. Reed's evaluation. She requested that no authority be granted without my appearance and that assets remain frozen against transfers until the hearing. A judge issued the restriction within hours. It blocked Ethan, but also prevented me from moving large sums or changing company votes. To keep Celeste out, I had locked myself inside my own finances. Ethan called before sunset. "Did you hire a lawyer against me?" "A court document named me. I asked someone to explain it." "You were not supposed to see that yet," he corrected himself. "We wanted to discuss it gently." "Why can Celeste place me in supervised housing?" "It is standard language." "Then remove it." Celeste took the phone. "Your fixation on one clause proves why professionals should guide this conversation." Her calm told me she did not know about the toxicology report. I let my voice weaken. "Perhaps after the wedding?" She agreed immediately. Her plan required delay. Lena then reviewed every signature connected to my properties. The rental companies used a digital certificate stored in my former office. Ethan once had permission to retrieve archived family documents. That trust had become a doorway. One property showed a lender inquiry made 6 weeks earlier. Another carried an appraisal I never ordered. The engagement letter, signed electronically in my name, requested combined equity figures across 4 buildings, more than $1.8 million. No public lien appeared, which briefly relieved me. Lena warned that private commercial credit could fund before recording. Her investigator contacted regional lenders through lawful owner inquiries. At 8:17 that night, a fraud officer responded. A $210,000 credit line had already been approved against 2 rentals. Funds were released 18 days earlier to North Star Legacy Strategies, a company unknown to me. The application included my digital signature, the clinic memorandum, and a statement naming Ethan as my representative. It claimed the loan financed accessibility renovations and estate planning. Neither existed. The officer could not reveal the final account without formal process, but confirmed North Star's mailing address, Ethan and Celeste's townhouse. My son had not merely signed a petition that might give him control later. Someone had already borrowed against Margaret's properties, using the impaired version of me they were still constructing. Lena closed the file. "The guardianship case is the distraction," she said. "The money moved first." North Star Legacy Strategies had no employees, office, or clients, only a mailbox, bank account, and Celeste as sole manager under her middle name, Elise Vane. Through the lender's fraud process, Lena's accountant traced the $210,000. Within 2 days, $187,500 became a cash deposit on a waterfront townhouse in Cape May. Another $14,000 paid furnishings, cameras, and association fees. The rest went to a driver and storage company. Ethan's name appeared nowhere. This was not their marital home. Celeste had built an exit belonging only to her. Closing was scheduled 48 hours after the wedding. Ethan believed they were building a future. Celeste planned to leave after he delivered control of mine. I wanted to warn him. Lena asked, "Will he read the evidence or warn her first?" I remembered him saying, "Please don't make this difficult. We chose evidence over hope." The lender risked scrutiny if it admitted approving forged documents, but canceling without recovering funds might let Celeste move everything. Lena proposed that a company owned by my trust purchase the note with its fraud clauses intact. The bank agreed after reviewing my capacity and ownership records. I was not paying Celeste's debt. I was moving the right to enforce it into hands she could not manipulate. 48 hours later, Calder Recovery Holdings owned the note. Once fraud was established, the full balance became due within 1 business day, and the townhouse bought with traced proceeds could be restrained. Their scheme had become leverage against them. Victory lasted 6 hours. Then Dr. Pike filed an emergency addendum claiming my loan investigation demonstrated financial paranoia. He had never examined me. His source was Ethan. The court kept the asset freeze until Monday and allowed Pike to observe me briefly at the wedding if Grace remained present. Celeste had converted my defense into another symptom. Lena urged me to skip the ceremony because any incident might become edited evidence, but absence would let Celeste control the story, the urn, and Ethan. I agreed to attend under strict conditions. Only food and drink controlled by Grace. No private meeting with Pike, and no signatures. Lena would remain nearby with 2 fraud investigators holding the toxicology report, video, and loan file. They still needed a final link proving Celeste knew the signature was forged and the Cape May property used stolen funds. I offered that opening. During a recorded call, I told Celeste I had found an old company signature stamp and wondered whether Ethan needed it for vendors. "Bring it in your briefcase," she replied immediately. "We can organize everything after the toast." She already knew the stamp. The real one stayed locked with Lena. A harmless replica went into my case beside the acquired note, laboratory results, and townhouse photograph. Celeste made another request. Leave Margaret's urn at home because visible grief might concern Dr. Pike. The memorial threatened the image she needed. I refused. "Margaret will be present when Ethan marries." Her voice chilled. "Then don't blame me if people see how unhealthy this is." On the wedding morning, Grace noticed the urn's felt base had been partly peeled away. Someone had searched beneath it during Celeste's visit, but failed to remove the inner plate. We did not know what lay behind it. Disturbing Margaret's ashes before the ceremony felt wrong, so I wrapped the urn in her blue scarf and carried it with me. At Aurelia House, Pike watched every step as though walking were a diagnosis. Celeste smiled for cameras. Ethan avoided my eyes, and the Cape May closing documents waited electronically for midnight. I placed the urn near the head table and the briefcase beside my chair. The wedding was not a celebration surrounding their plan. It was the deadline at its center. Celeste waited for the final toast because humiliation required an audience. She praised Ethan for escaping, a family trapped in grief, then turned toward Margaret's urn. Dr. Pike stood near the stage recording. This was not uncontrolled cruelty. Celeste needed me angry and violent before 300 witnesses. A marriage cannot begin while a dead woman controls every room. Ethan whispered her name but did not move. Celeste raised the urn above the champagne fountain. "Tonight we release the past." She smashed it against the marble. Porcelain burst beneath her dress. Ash crossed the floor, and the brass key spun free. Ethan looked at his mother's remains. "Dad, don't ruin this over a jar." Pike moved closer, awaiting my reaction. Rage would give Celeste the evidence she lacked. I knelt, picked up the key, and gathered the blue scarf around what ash I could save. Grace joined me. "Dad, that key fits Mom's box." Lena had brought the sealed cedar box from the bank and placed it in my briefcase with the legal files. I carried both to the podium. Celeste smirked. "He brought documents to a wedding. Because you brought a guardianship case." Pike announced that I appeared agitated. Grace faced him. "Grief after someone destroys your wife's remains is not cognitive impairment." The key opened the cedar box. Inside were a notarized letter, a recorder, and an amendment Margaret signed 12 years earlier. Lena read it. If either child sought control through an incapacity claim without 2 independent examinations, that child's authority and access to voting shares would be suspended. Control would pass to an outside fiduciary pending court review. Margaret had created a boundary before betrayal existed. Celeste's plan activated the protection she tried to bypass. I pressed play. Margaret's voice filled the ballroom. "Owen, if this box is open, someone has mistaken your love for permission. Protect yourself without teaching our children that love disappears when trust is broken." Ethan covered his mouth. Celeste reached for the recorder, but Lena blocked her and identified herself as counsel. I opened the second folder and explained the $72,000 venue lie, cosmetic procedures, false email, capacity file, and drugged cookies. Lena displayed the laboratory record and kitchen video on the band's screen. Celeste's voice echoed, "These are stronger. Eat 2 before bed." Guests stopped filming content and began preserving evidence. Celeste called the video fake. "Doctor." Reed appeared by secure video and confirmed my normal assessment conducted before the second batch. Pike tried to leave, but Lena asked him to remain available for investigators. I displayed the forged $210,000 loan and Cape May townhouse purchased through North Star. Ethan stared at Celeste. "You said North Star was our future company." "It is." "Then why is the house only yours?" She turned on him. "Because your father conditioned you to fail, I protected myself." Her answer supplied the final link: knowledge and personal benefit. I removed the loan note. North Star no longer owes the bank. Calder Recovery Holdings purchased the debt. Because my signature was forged, the full balance is due tomorrow, and the Cape May closing has been restrained. Celeste's face emptied. She grabbed Ethan's arm and ordered him to declare me confused. Ethan looked from Pike to the scattered ashes. This was his last chance to choose her story. "I signed the petition," he whispered. "But she brought the documents. She said Dad would never be hurt." It was not innocence, but it was his first truth. 2 county fraud investigators entered. They identified themselves, preserved Celeste's phone and the replica stamp, and served orders preventing destruction of evidence or transfer of the townhouse. Celeste backed into a porcelain fragment. "This is my wedding. You cannot do this here." "You chose here," I said. "You wanted witnesses." Ethan moved toward us, crying, but Grace raised one hand. "Not yet." Together, we gathered Margaret's ashes into the scarf. There was no triumph in kneeling beneath chandeliers to collect the woman I loved. But beneath grief was something steady. Celeste shattered the urn to prove I was unstable. Instead, she broke open the safeguard Margaret left and gave every witness a clear view of who had truly lost control. The wedding ended without music or a final dance. Celeste left with investigators, while Ethan signed an evidence preservation notice with shaking hands. Lena warned him that ending the marriage would not erase his conduct. He signed the guardianship petition, repeated false claims about my memory, and supported the loan. Manipulation explained his choices. It did not make them harmless. On Monday, the probate judge dismissed the petition after reviewing Dr. Reed's evaluation, toxicology reports, and kitchen recording. The court lifted the freeze on my accounts, while keeping restrictions on North Star, Ethan, and Celeste. Dr. Pike admitted relying entirely on information from Ethan in the clinic. He never conducted the observation implied by his addendum. The judge referred him to the licensing board and excluded his statements. For weeks, strangers debated whether I could govern my life. Hearing the judge say, "Mr. Calder is competent, informed, and entitled to be left alone," restored something money could not measure. The Cape May townhouse never closed. Its deposit was frozen, and traced funds returned through a settlement. Because Calder Recovery Holdings owned the note, I could have demanded crushing penalties. I accepted principal, legal costs, and restitution. Consequences should repair damage, not become permission to imitate the person who caused it. Celeste faced charges for exploitation, forgery, unlawful medication, and conspiracy through false capacity claims. Confronted with recordings, laboratory evidence, and North Star records, she accepted a plea requiring restitution, probation, and a ban on managing another person's finances. The image she built collapsed because it had no foundation. Ethan surrendered his devices and admitted knowing the wedding money funded cosmetic procedures. He denied knowing about the medication or that the townhouse excluded him. Investigators accepted parts of that denial, but the court still ordered restitution and a financial ethics program. His employer suspended him for using company status on clinic forms. Grace stopped me from rescuing him. "If you pay his lawyer, rent, or restitution, he will experience this as another crisis," Dad solved. She was right. I removed Ethan from every authorization, trust roll, property account, and emergency directive. His inheritance entered a discretionary trust. he could neither control nor borrow against. Boundaries were not prizes or revenge. They were engineering, placing weight only where the structure could carry it. Ethan's early apologies focused on what he lost: his marriage, promotion, reputation, and money. I asked, "What did I lose?" He could not answer. 4 months later, he came to my door without asking for funds. He carried the repaired blue scarf and a wooden urn he had made. "I cannot replace what Celeste broke," he said. "I helped her break more than porcelain." I did not invite him inside. Not yet. I accepted the urn. Accountability begins when your apology names someone else's wound instead of your punishment. Ethan left without asking when I would forgive him. That was the first reason I believed forgiveness might someday become possible. The wooden urn remained on my hallway table for 3 weeks. Ethan built it from reclaimed walnut taken from the first pedestrian bridge Margaret and I restored. He carved rosemary around the lid. Craftsmanship did not erase betrayal, but it showed effort made without an audience. Grace and I decided Margaret should no longer rest on a mantle where grief could be displayed or weaponized. We created a stone garden behind my house beside the rosemary bed she planted during our last summer. The urn rested in a sealed granite niche surrounded by living things. Grace chose white roses. I chose a bench wide enough for 3, though neither of us mentioned the empty place. Ethan asked Lena, not me, whether he could help. That mattered. Remorse did not grant direct access to the person harmed. I allowed him to lay foundation stones while Grace supervised. He arrived early, brought his own tools, and never mentioned forgiveness. By afternoon, his palms had blistered. Margaret used to say, "Honest work introduces a person to himself." The criminal case ended 11 months after the wedding. Celeste completed restitution by surrendering North Star funds and selling assets bought through fraud. Her plea included probation and restrictions against acting as a caregiver or financial agent. Ethan's marriage was annulled. He sold his car, moved into a modest apartment, and repaid his part of the $72,000 monthly. I rejected his plan to repay everything with another loan. Borrowed restitution would repeat the pattern. Pay what your honest life can support. The duration is part of the lesson. He found work coordinating nonprofit housing projects and attended counseling without sending progress reports. For 6 months, we communicated through Lena and Grace. Then we began meeting for coffee monthly. Trust did not return because he cried correctly or completed assignments. It returned in fragments whenever actions matched words, and he accepted that I might still say no. One Sunday, Ethan joined us in the garden. He placed Margaret's recipe book beside the niche. "I used her memory to get Dad's check," he told Grace. Then I let Celeste call Mom a burden because the truth would expose me. It was his first apology, naming his choice without hiding behind manipulation. Grace did not embrace him. Keep telling the truth when it costs you something. We sat on the bench, leaving space between us. I never restored Ethan's company vote, property authority, or unrestricted inheritance. Love resumed before access did. That distinction kept us from rebuilding the same family with kinder language. The independent trust remained, protecting my children from pressure and me from using money to repair emotion. On Margaret's death anniversary, I replayed her recording. "Protect yourself without teaching our children that love disappears when trust is broken." At first, I heard permission to fight. Now I heard the second instruction. Boundaries were not love disappearing. They were the shape love took after safety was damaged. Celeste mistook patience for weakness. Ethan mistook forgiveness for rescue. I had mistaken providing for parenting. Only those facing the truth could build afterward. As evening settled over the rosemary, Ethan asked to return the next week and repair a loose stone. I inspected the gap, then handed him the garden gate key, not the house, company, or accounts. One gate, one task, one measured piece of trust. Bring your own tools. I will. It was not the family we had before. It was smaller, slower, and honest enough to carry weight.